peak of the flying circus, the best squadron in the world. By 1918, the flying circus became the pinnacle of aerial warfare. Among its pilots were Kurt Wolff, Lothar von Richthofen, Werner Voss, Fritz Rumi, Karl Allmenröder. These were men who could win battles alone, but under the Baron's command, they became a perfect killing machine. The squadron operated like a single organism. They used complex formations, the saw blade attack, the dominant turn, the cross trap, the sundown dive. No allied group could match their coordination. Werner Voss, the genius who flew like a shadow. If the Red Baron was the mathematician of the sky, Werner Voss was his artist. Many believed he was the best pilot in Germany, even better than the Baron. He was only 20, but possessed inhuman reflexes. He flew the Fokker Dr. Duarche, a same triple-wing fighter that became the circus's symbol. His fighting style. Voss flew in a way no one else could. His maneuvers looked impossible. He entered a steep turn, suddenly dropped the aircraft as if falling, then shot upward a second later. Like a feather caught in the wind, enemies said, he didn't fly, he danced. His favorite maneuver was the skid on the edge. He would twist the aircraft so the enemy lost sight of him for a fraction of a second, and that fraction was all he needed. Psychology of the first ages, heroes or doomed men. The world saw romance in pilots, legends, charisma, the beauty of aerial duels. Newspapers printed their photographs. Children collected cars with airplanes. Women wrote letters to the knights of the sky. But inside the pilots themselves lived another truth. Every day meant another sortie. Every sortie, a chance not to return. Every glimpse of a living enemy, shock, fear, instinct. Many aces wrote in their diaries, I am not a hero. I'm simply trying to fire first. They lived fast, tense, and painfully. No one knew if he would see the sunrise. Albert Ball, the quiet genius of the sky. One of the first great aces was the British pilot Albert Ball. He was a contradiction. Quiet, introverted, hated attention, disliked medals, but was obsessed with flying. He flew almost always alone. A lone wolf. His fighting style was sharp and unpredictable. He attacked swiftly, suddenly, diving from the shadows of clouds and disappearing before the enemy understood what had happened. Paul became a hero of Britain. He was called the Angelic Boy. But in 1917 he died when his aircraft fell while flying through heavy cloud cover, fog, low visibility, a spin. He was only 20 years old. Britain was devastated because its hero did not die from a bullet. He died from the scar. The psychology of a hunter. What made the Baron unbeatable? He thought of battles as problems to solve, not as duels, not as matters of honor, but as mathematics. He analyzed every encounter upon returning. He drew conclusions. He taught his pilots. Never chase too far behind enemy lines. Never waste ammunition. Never give in to emotion. Never trust the weather. Never attack from a bad altitude. One of his sayings became famous. In the sky, victory belongs not to bravery, but to discipline. The deadly statistics. This is why he became the most successful pilot of the entire war. 80 confirmed victories, 20 to 30 probable, 0 times shot down for real before the last day, 0 parachute escapes, 0 panic maneuvers, 0 violations of his own rules. No pilot of the First World War ever came close to his level of consistency. The wound that almost killed him, July 6, 1917. Manfred was struck by a bullet in the head. The round pierced his skull, scraped across the bone in a long arc, and exited near his eye. His aircraft plunged into a dive. He lost his vision. Senior pilots thought it was the end, but he managed to regain consciousness for a single second. Gasping for air, choking, he leveled the aircraft just a few meters above the ground. He landed at his own airfield, covered in blood. He was pulled out of the cockpit unconscious. Doctors said, "He won't fly for at least a year." The Baron walked out of the hospital after 40 days and returned to combat. From that moment, his character changed. He grew darker, more restrained. He no longer laughed. A fellow pilot later wrote, "After the wound, he became a different man. He flew just as precisely, but his eyes had changed." War in the Sky, the first aces of aviation, the Red Baron, and the birth of aerial combat. World War I became the moment when humanity first realized the sky was no longer a symbol of freedom, no longer a place of dreams and flights into the future. It had become a battlefield. 1914, just yesterday, flight was a miracle. People looked up at airplanes as if they were circus acts. Aircraft were the toys of wealthy enthusiasts, quiet, fragile machines barely able to stay in the air. But when Europe descended into war, the sky was immediately dragged into the conflict. For the first time in history, humans began to fight where there were no trenches, no barbed wire, no artillery batteries. Where the only protection was the sky beneath the wings and your own hands, gripping the controls. The first aircraft, fragile, bare, and astonishing. The first airplanes of the war were wooden frames covered with canvas. Their engines were weak and loud. Their wings bent during sharp maneuvers, and their propellers often broke right in midair. But these machines had one key advantage. They gave armies new eyes on the horizon. Pilots took to the sky as scouts, no weapons, only eyesight, a map, and a desperate awareness of their own fragility. At 3,000 meters in an open cockpit, the wind struck the face like icy needles. Fingers were numb. Breathing was difficult. The aircraft shook so violently it seemed determined to throw the pilot out. But these men became the first aviators of war. They did not yet realize they were pioneers of a new kind of battle. The birth of an idea. If there is an enemy in the sky, he must be shot down. The first aerial combat happened almost by accident. A French pilot saw a German reconnaissance plane and, not knowing what else to do, began throwing wrenches at it. In another encounter, pilots fired pistols at each other, trying to get close enough to hit something. These early dogfights looked absurd more than effective, but a new understanding began to form within the armies. Whoever controls the sky controls the battlefield. And so began the race of engineering. Engineering breakthrough, a machine gun that fires through the propeller. The biggest problem early fighters faced was simple. Where do you put the machine gun? If mounted right in front, it shot the propeller. If mounted to the side, aiming became impossible. If placed behind the wing, the pilot couldn't see the enemy. Engineer Anthony Fokker found the solution. He created a synchronization gear that paused the machine gun for a fraction of a second every time a propeller blade passed in front of the barrel. This allowed the creation of the Fokker Eindecker, the first true fighter aircraft in human history. The sky was no longer peaceful. It had become a hunting ground. The rise of the aces, the new knights of the sky. The word ace appeared in France. A war correspondent described a pilot who had shot down 5 enemy aircraft set down as, "He is an ace." A new term, a new title, a new profession was born. And Ace wasn't just a soldier, he was a hero, a living legend, a warrior who fought not among thousands, but one-on-one. Newspapers called them Knights of the Sky. On the ground, they were treated like stars, but in the air, they were hunters. The emergence of the Red Baron, the deadliest pilot of the war. When Manfred von Richthofen first sat in the cockpit of an airplane, no one could have imagined that this young officer would become a symbol of an entire era. He began his career differently. As a cavalryman, he loved horses, sports, hunting. He never planned to become a pilot. But when he saw aerial reconnaissance in action, something inside him clicked. In the sky, he saw a new form of the Hun. Richthofen mastered flying quickly and coldly. He was not a romantic born for the air like many others. He was a hunter by nature, precise, disciplined, unemotional. He studied the enemy like a predator studies prey, observing maneuvers, altitude, trajectory, chances. He seemed like the perfect killer in the sky. His airplane, a symbol of fear. Richthofen painted his aircraft bright red, the most visible, bold, provocative color imaginable. It was madness. In an era when pilots preferred camouflage, he made himself unmistakable. But there was a deeper strategy. The Red Baron wanted to be recognized. He wanted the enemy to lose confidence before he fired. He wanted fear itself to fight for him. The red biplane became a legend. People said, if you see a red plane, pray. Back to the Red Baron, where the sky was the most terrifying. Manfred von Richthofen quickly became a symbol of Germany. But few people know that he was a very grounded man. He was not a romantic, not a philosopher, not someone inspired by the poetic beauty of flight. He was a hunter. He valued discipline, cold calculation, precision iron, will his pilots said. When the Baron takes off, he becomes a different person. He changed. The softness disappeared. The smile vanished. Only the gaze remained, still, tense, attentive down to the millimeter. His tactics, the art of killing without risk. Richthofen attacked only when he was 100% certain he brought down enemies methodically. A typical attack of his looked like this. He climbed above the opponent, hid inside a cloud, the engine noise fading to a distant hum, then suddenly dived, plunging at nearly 200 kilometers per hour and slipped right into the enemy's blind spot behind the tail. Then a short burst, 3 to 5 bullets, and that was it. No emotion, no risk, no elegant loops. He wrote, "Tricks are for those who want to die beautifully. I want to live." Real combat was nothing like the pictures. Aerial battles of that era were pure chaos. The sun blinded the eyes, bullets whistled past, the engine roared, shaking the entire machine. Other planes flickered like shadows. Wind punched into the lungs, engine oil splashed into the face, blood from small cuts froze on the skin. And all of this happened in a three-dimensional battlefield where every single second was a question of life or death. Pilots were not thinking about glory. They were thinking about one thing: how to survive the next 15 seconds. The Red Baron, the man feared in the sky. Manfred von Richthofen was born into an aristocratic family, polite, calm, disciplined. But inside him, there was always a hunger for competition, be it hunting, sports, or war. He loved winning, he loved order, he loved clarity. These three qualities made him the perfect pilot and the perfect commander. His first kill in the sky, September 11, 1915, a date Richthofen marked in his diary as his moment of birth. He took off on a reconnaissance mission with another pilot when he spotted a British aircraft. That day, he was not yet the Red Baron. He did not have his own plane. He was not an ace. He was a student of war trying to prove to himself that he could do it. He chased the enemy through the clouds, climbing higher and higher. The engine roared, the aircraft trembled, but Richthofen kept pushing forward. Eventually, he got behind the enemy and fired. 3 short bursts. The enemy aircraft began to lose altitude, spinning and falling, but it crashed behind British lines, and no one could confirm the victory. Richthofen was furious. He had seen the enemy fall. He was certain he had shot it down. But without confirmation, the victory did not exist. Manfred swore to himself, "I will bring them down so clearly that no one can ever doubt it." This anger became the source of his legendary precision. The first confirmed victory, September 17th, 1916. Richthofen was flying his Albatross when he spotted a British FE-2B, a heavy 2-seat but well-armed aircraft. The wind was strong, altitude about 3,000 meters. The sun hit the ice, but Richthofen waited patiently for the right moment. He made a turn, got behind the enemy and opened fire. 1 short burst, a hit. Another, and the aircraft caught fire. The British pilot died. His gunner, too. Richthofen landed and wrote in his diary, "Today I have finally proven that I am capable." It was the first of 80 confirmed victories. No German pilot before or after would ever surpass that record. The creation of the flying circus, the elite of the elite. By 1917, Richthofen had become so effective that he was appointed commander of Jasta 11, a fighter squadron. He created a legendary doctrine. Let the first enemy waves pass attack from above, divide the sky into sectors, fight like a pack. Fast, coordinated, predatory pilots of Jasta 11 painted their aircraft in bright colors, not to show bravery, but so the comrades could instantly recognize each other during combat. The psychological effect was massive. British and French pilots said they appear suddenly, you see red, yellow, blue, and you know the circus of death has arrived. This mobile group became so successful that it was named the Fliegende Circus, the flying circus. They moved across the front like a traveling troupe, always appearing where they were least expected. Real duels, how the Baron actually killed in the sky. Let's examine one of his better-known fights, a duel against the British pilot Lionel Morris, one of the best young aviators in England. Scene 1. The sky in fog, altitude about 2,000 meters. Weather, low clouds, poor visibility. Morris was flying a 2-seat biplane. His gunner scanned the sky through the machine gun sight. Richthofen emerged from a cloud suddenly, like a shadow. He performed no acrobatics, took no unnecessary risks. He simply took the perfect position, behind and slightly below, a place from which escape is impossible. Scene 2. The burst. Richthofen pulled the trigger. A short burst into the tail. Morris's aircraft began to lose control. The gunner tried to fire back, but the angle made aiming impossible. Scene 3. A polite death. As the enemy began to fall, the Baron did not finish them off. He followed the descending aircraft to ensure it would not recover. Later he wrote, "He was brave, I gave him my respect." This revealed Richthofen's nature, ruthless but not cruel, cold but not heartless, a killer with a personal code. Not all fights were easy. The Baron saw death up close. There was a legendary fight in which Richthofen came very close to dying. The duel against British pilot Lancelot Hawker, 1917. Hawker was incredibly skilled. He instantly understood that the legend of Germany was hunting him. The Baron attacked, but Hawker performed a sharp dive downward, and then an abrupt climb upward, an advanced maneuver for that time. Richthofen lost position. For several long seconds, he was under crossfire from British machine guns. Bullets hit the fuselage, one struck the wing, another passed within centimeters of his head. But Richthofen held the aircraft, regained position, and eventually shot Hawker down. Later he wrote, "It was a rare moment when I felt I might die, but fear forced me to act faster." The Flying Circus, the deadliest pilots in Europe. The Red Baron created his own squadron, Yasta 11. He personally trained pilots, designed methods, developed tactics. Thus was born the legendary group known as Der Fliegende Circus, the Flying Circus. Why circus? Because the planes were painted in bright color, yellow, blue, orange, green. Each pilot chose his own pattern. They moved from airfield to airfield, suddenly appearing over the front like a traveling show. Except deadly, no one could escape them. Richthofen's secret, not bravery, but method. Richthofen followed strict rules. Never join a chaotic dogfight. Never attack alone if a group attack is possible. Never risk your life for a beautiful maneuver. Attack from above. After attacking, climb upward again. And most importantly, fire only when you're certain you will hit. He wrote, "I do not need to be an acrobat. I need to win." And he did. The real meaning of air combat. Air combat is not romantic. It looks beautiful only to those who watch from the ground. For the pilot, it is the feeling that the earth is very far away and death is very, very close. It is the roar of the engine screaming in your ears. It is hands shaking from the cold. It is a motor that can stall at any moment. It is a machine gun that can jam. It is the fabric of the wings behaving like a living creature. And always loneliness. When two aircraft meet in the sky, it is a duel. Man against man, speed against speed, nerve against nerve. War in the sky, the first aces of aviation. AR that can kill you. Pilots of the First World War did not wear oxygen masks. They had no pressurized helmets, no cockpit heating. They flew in ordinary leather jackets, wool pants, and thin gloves. At 3,000 to 4,000 meters, temperatures could drop to minus 25 degrees Celsius. The wind cut into their faces like a knife. The open cockpit turned the pilot into a frozen statue. But that was only the first problem. The main danger was the unpredictability of the aircraft itself. The biplanes of the era were made of thin wooden struts, duralumin tubes, steel cables, and fabrics soaked in lacquer. The lacquer made the fabric stiff like a drum. But under strong wind, the wings began to vibrate, and the pilot could literally feel the entire machine breathing beneath him, as if alive, as if ready to fall apart at any moment, one wrong maneuver, and the aircraft would enter a tailspin, almost always fatal. And despite all of this, pilots took off every single day, every day. They went where the chances of dying were equal to the chances of returning. The evolution of aircraft, from simple frames to living steel, aviation engineers in every country worked at the limit of their abilities. Their task was simple and deadly. We must build an aircraft that kills faster than the enemies. Every few months, new models appeared. Faster, more maneuverable, with more powerful engines, with 2 machine guns instead of 1, with aluminum parts instead of wood. The British created the Sopwith Camel, beautiful and dangerous, but demanding tremendous skill. The French created the SPAD S-13, one of the fastest and most reliable of the war. The Germans built the Albatros D3, D5, and later the legendary Fokker DR1, forever linked with the Red Baron. Engineers slept at factories because the front demanded new aircraft constantly. If a model lagged behind the enemies by even a month, pilots died by the hundreds. Aviation became a race of death, a race of intellect, a race of pure efficiency. Now, short real stories they never teach in school. World War I is not just the Baron of Voss. It is thousands of pilots who died almost without a trace. Here are several true scenes you can use in your video. The story 1. The fall from 4,000 meters. A French fighter pilot was attacked by three Germans. Bullets pierced the fuel tank. Gasoline ignited. He had two choices: burn alive or jump. Parachutes were not issued to fighter pilots. Only airship crews had them. He jumped out. When his body was found, it was so mangled from the fall that he was identified by his metal tag. This story spread across the front as a reminder: in the sky, there is no escape. Story 2. Alive but blind. In 1918, British pilot Geoffrey Blackstone was hit in the face. Blood filled his eyes. He went blind. His aircraft began to fall blind. He kept pulling the controls, stabilizing the plane by instinct alone. He managed to land at his own airfield. When soldiers opened the cockpit, he was still holding the stick unconscious. He survived. His vision never returned. Story 3. Two enemies who remained human. They were extraordinary stories too. A French pilot shot down a German ace. The ace survived by parachute. By the end of the war, a few fighters had them. The French pilot descended, opened his cockpit, and threw down a thermos of hot coffee to the fallen German war was war. But they were pilots, men whose respect for each other stood above politics. Now, the climax of the entire story, the death of the Red Baron. This is the emotional peak. You can turn it into a standalone segment. The death of the Red Baron, April 21st, 1918. Somme, France. Clear sky, light clouds, moderate wind. The Baron took off in his red Fokker Doctor gear alongside his squadron. He was no longer the man he once was. After his head wound, he suffered from headaches, occasional vision loss, sudden bursts of weakness. But he continued to fly. He could do nothing else. Scene 1. The takeoff. He saw British fighters chasing a young German pilot. Wilhelm Wolf Richthofen would not allow his man to die. He dove down and did something he had never done before. He chased the enemy at extremely low altitude. Just above the ground, it violated all his own rules. And it was fatal. Scene 2. The fatal chase. He pursued the British plane of Lieutenant Arthur Roy Brown over the Somme River. Above the tree line, and there, Australian soldiers spotted him and fired. There were two sources of bullets. Brown's aircraft, Australian machine gunners on the ground. The lethal bullet entered under his right armpit, passed through his lung and heart, and exited on the other side. Cause of death: a shot from the ground, not from the air. Researchers examining the body confirmed the wound trajectory from below upward. Scene 3. His last seconds. The Baron continued to control the plane for several seconds. He tried to land. He never lost control. The Fokker touched down on a field. Almost perfectly, Australian soldiers ran toward him. Richthofen was still alive. He tried to speak. Witnesses say his last words were kaput, kaput, finished, it's over. He died moments later. He was 25. Scene 4. His final honor. His enemies buried him with full military honors. Wreaths were placed on his grave. Soldiers stood at attention, officers saluted. One note left by British pilots read, "He was our enemy, but he was a great man." His death marked the end of the era of elegant, knightly air war after the Baron. What came next? His squadron continued to fight. The war lasted another 6 months. But the era had changed. Planes grew faster, battles grew harsher, strategy became mass scale. Air combat ceased to be a duel. It became industry. But because of Richthofen, Voss, Ball, Fonck, Bishop, and countless others, the world understood that the sky was a new battlefield, a field of heroes, a field of tragedy, a place where death could come beautifully, but always too soon. The paradox of World War I, when soul and steel collided. World War I was the clash of two eras, romanticism and mechanization. In the sky, this contrast was sharpest. Pilots were the last knights of Europe, the last to fight not in mud and trenches, but one-on-one, face-to-face, eye-to-eye. Yet their weapons belonged to the future. Machine guns, combustion engines, aerodynamics, metal speed. It was the world's first merging of man and machine. Aviation evolves, romance fades, machines rise. At the beginning of the war, airplanes were fragile birds. By the end, they were weapons, predators, monsters of the sky. They appeared. Metal airframes, more powerful engines, wings capable of enormous stress, longer flight times, early optical sights. But most importantly, aviation became systematic. No more duels. No more colorful wings. No more gallant gestures. By 1918, the sky had become predatory, fast, mass-produced, technical, merciless. The aces disappeared. Hundreds of ordinary trained pilots replaced them. Men taught to act, not think. What happened to the surviving aces? René Fonck became a national hero. Parades, books, diplomacy, but peace broke him emotionally. He never forgot the war died quietly in 1953. Billy Bishop returned home, a Canadian icon, a symbol of courage, but nightmares haunted him for life. He drank heavily, aged fast, hid his pain behind jokes. Lothar von Richthofen, the Baron's brother, survived the war, died later in a civilian crash, a symbol of the truth. Those who survived the war in the air rarely survived life itself. German aces most never adapted to peace. In the sky, they were gods. On the ground, nobody. Some became instructors, some politicians, some extremists in the chaotic post-war years. End of 1918, the beginning of the air age. In 1914, approximately 200 aircraft. In 1918, over 10,000. What began as an experiment became a decisive military force aviation brought. Aerial reconnaissance, artillery correction, infantry attacks, dogfights for air supremacy, the first bombing raids, the first night flights. For the first time, humanity understood who controls the sky controls the war. From the Barents era to the age of wealthy fighters. Thanks to WWI, experience came. Dive bombers, heavy bombers, steel monoplanes, 500 plus kilometers per hour, fighters on board radio, early radar prototypes. Twice Deuce. Aviators trained using Richthofen's tactics, Voss's diagrams, Shasta 11's coordination. That small, romantic, fragile air war became the foundation of the massive air power of the future. The philosophical conclusion, the last nights of the sky. When we look at footage of WWI, we met these pilots were heroic madmen chasing glory. The truth is different. Every one of them was a doomed man. Everyone lived day to day. Everyone knew coming back today does not mean coming back tomorrow. They became legends not because they fought, but because they fought the impossible. the wind, the cold, the machines, the fire, and the scariest enemy, their own thoughts when the sky grew too quiet. They were the first to see war from above, the first to reveal a new dimension of battle, where death comes fast and freedom feels closer than anywhere. They flew machines made of canvas and wood, at heights where breathing was difficult, where the wind drowned their own thoughts. And still they climbed back into the sky not for killing, not for glory, but because once they saw the world from above, they could no longer live without that wind, that cold, that sky. Their world is gone. Modern aviation is faster, harsher, mechanical, but the memory of the first aces endures in the red paint of the Baron's aircraft, in Werner Voss's fiery dance, in Albert Paul's final breath, in René Fonk's precision, in Billy Bishop's audacity. They built the path to the sky, the path the whole world flies today. And when we look upward into the mist, the clouds, the blue, we see not only the sky, we see the memory of those who were the first to be there. Those who made the sky part of war, and those who made war part of the sky.